Hi and welcome to the final episode of London's Fashion Alphabet. My name is Lucie Whitmore, I'm the Curator of Fashion at the Museum of London, and in this last episode we are going to be catching some Zs and looking at some of the amazing sleepwear in our dress and textile collection. So at the moment, many of us might be wearing our sleepwear and our loungewear a little bit more than usual as we navigate these strange times and reach for something a little bit more comfortable. There is a long history of a blurring of the lines between sleepwear, loungewear and even daywear, so if you've been wearing your pyjamas for your morning Zoom calls, then don't worry, you're in good historical company. Because our theme today is catching some Zs, I am going to focus more on some garments that were worn more specifically for sleeping, but that's not to say that they weren't also worn for lounging around the house in close company. I'm going to start today by showing you something really special. This is one of the earliest intact garments in our collection. It dates from 1583 to 1590 and it is a man's nightshirt. Now we know it is a nightshirt and not a day shirt because of the length. Day shirts would have reached to about the thigh or the knee, and this is quite a bit longer, probably reaching to the calf or ankle depending on the height of the wearer. It has been made from one single selvage width of linen that has been folded at the shoulder to create the shoulder seam. The shirt fastens at the wrists with these lovely small toggles. Sadly one is missing, but you can see the other one here. And it ties at the neck with these plaited strands of silk and metallic threads, each decorated with 3 tiny tassels. All of the edges of the nightshirt are oversewn with this variation of a buttonhole stitch and edged with some lace. This is detached needle lace worked in linen thread. The body and sleeves of the shirt are decorated with embroidery. Here we have bands of embroidery worked continuously in a long line of stitch to create this leaf-like pattern. And here, in the more open areas, we have these leaf motifs, worked alternately in red and gold, silver and green. This nightshirt comes from the period where we start to see more of a distinction between daywear and nightwear. For the previous 5 centuries, most people would have either slept in their day clothes or the underclothes that they wore in the day, or as the more affordable option, they just would have slept naked. And depending on your class and your income, that practice probably would have continued for quite some time. But in the 16th and 17th centuries, garments like this, dedicated for sleepwear, were being worn more by wealthier men and women. And it's worth noting that actually this style of garment didn't change very much at all for the next 3 centuries. And this style of garment would have been worn interchangeably by men and women with very little differentiation. But it is towards the end of the 19th century that we see the dawn of the pyjama. Pyjamas first start to be worn by men around the late 19th century and early 20th century, although they still weren't entirely the norm by 1907, when one newspaper wrote, "One of the many little ways in which Englishmen are gradually changing their domestic habits is to be seen in the growth of the popularity of pyjamas, which are slowly but surely taking the place of the old-fashioned nightshirt." For the first 15 years of the 20th century, pyjamas were really only advertised to men and were worn primarily by men. But it is with the First World War that we see women start to wear these trousered garments for sleeping. They were increasingly becoming more acceptable, and in March 1918, one newspaper commented, "It seems but a comparatively short time since pyjamas were first introduced for women's use, and their wearers were looked upon in the light of extraordinary freaks. But now fully 1/3 of our sex go to their slumbers clad in a sleeping suit. Many women find them much warmer and more comfortable." As with the boudoir caps that I discussed in an earlier episode of this series, pyjamas found favour during the First World War because of the night raids that were experienced by many Londoners. It was considered to be safer and more comfortable for women should they have to flee their beds in the middle of the night to be wearing pyjamas rather than a nightgown. Though pyjamas were commonplace on the pages of women's fashion magazines and department store catalogues, there are very few survivals of women's pyjamas from this earlier period. The earliest pyjamas that we have in our collection date from the very late 1920s or early 1930s, and I'm going to show you my most favourite pair now. This monogrammed and homemade pair of pyjamas were worn by a woman named Lillian Hawkes. They consist of a matching pyjama jacket and trousers made in this oyster-coloured silk satin with a green chartreuse edging. The pocket on the jacket is embroidered with the initial L for Lillian. And there is a matching dressing gown which has her full initials, LRH. The pyjamas fasten at the side with 3 buttons and have a lovely flared shape. The jacket cinches at the waist with a sort of belted waistband. One interesting thing to note about these pyjamas is that they appear to be made from a silk satin, but on closer inspection we find out that they may in fact be at least partially composed of artificial fibres. On the inside of the jacket you can see this mark in the exact shape of the top of an iron. It hasn't burnt the fabric, it looks more like it's melted it, which sort of suggests the presence of some synthetic fibres such as viscose. And viscose was widely in use for things like women's underwear, sleepwear and everyday garments at this time. It was about the time that Lillian's pyjamas were made that pyjamas became extremely popular in another sphere, the beach. At that time, it wasn't really common for women to wear trousers in public, but the beach provided the casual setting and the relaxation of rules that allowed women to wear beautiful flowing beach pyjamas in bright colours. If you look at photography from the period, you can see they were often worn over or with a swimsuit and are really, really beautiful garments. I'm sad that we don't have any in our collection. Pyjama suits were also worn not necessarily for sleeping, but in the privacy of women's own homes. And we have a lovely pair of what we would call lounge pyjamas from the 1930s here. These come from Woolens in Knightsbridge, who describe themselves as a lingerie specialist, and they have these beautiful carved bakelite buttons. I'd really like a pair of these for working from home. Well, that's it, we did it. We finished the fashion alphabet. Thank you so much from me and from all the other presenters of this series. We've really loved hearing from you all along the way, and please do let us know what you would like to see from us next. In the meantime, stay safe and we will see you soon.